him that would make sure that he doesn't fall into the same type of traps, the same type of pitfalls of having additional charges on his record. That's the point I'm
The
trying to
community failed the guy who shot the
I was
waiter.
about to say, right? Right.
Well,
They shot him
before,
11
maybe
times.
maybe before that, I don't know that there's a huge.
Maybe he failed the community. Like maybe
Well,
he fucked up. Like why do we
entire-
look to a community? Because at the end, like I'm sure there are plenty of other individuals who grew up in that community that aren't going around shooting people. Like why isn't it just his fuck up?
I know this is a very dry conversation, but we don't need to be dramatic about things.
Wait, how is this dramatic?
We can recognize, because you're doing the thing where
what thing?
The topic's pretty boring, and we gotta drive the content.
No, I'm asking you to fucking justify what you just said. So because it seems like what you're implying is that if a criminal in a community does harm to their fucking community, it's somehow the community's fault that the criminal did this to them. Like I'm asking you why that's the case. Why is it wrong to say that he failed, he fucked up, and he damaged his community?
That's
you
not
can
that's not
respond.
what
I
I
don't think the
said.
topic's boring though, but okay.
No, it's not that it's boring. It's just that.
Well, what Joe does when he gets any kind of pressure
pressure
is he folds and pretends it's all trolling, and he's not serious, and he's not going to engage. He's just a bitch. So Joe, start engaging.
There's the
please.
truth. There's the truth. There's the truth. How you
Yeah,
feel.
I think you're acting like a
Love it.
bitch. So start engaging.
Okay, all right. So we'll just jump into it, which means, of course, I don't actually have the topics in front of me. Here we go. Topic 1: a non-profit group called the Bail Project, which was backed by celebrities, has shut down. This is after it was sued for posting bail for a criminal who shot an innocent man a week later. The group was against the concept of bail, which it sees as racist and punishment for the poor. Do you think the lawsuit against the group has any merit? Were they wrong for releasing the criminal, and should bail be abolished? So yeah, this was a really interesting topic that I stumbled on, and there's this individual who he went to jail previously, before this incident. He had gone to jail for multiple different crimes, been in and out. And this time the Bail Project, which I had heard of, and doing good work, happened to be the ones who bailed them out. And then a week later, he goes into a restaurant and shoots this guy 7 times. He survives, luckily. But that individual, the innocent man, then sues the Bail Project, and they shut down afterwards. So I really want to examine this topic of bail, whether it should be a thing or not, and this particular incident, should they have let this particular person go with the knowledge that they had? Okay, so let's start with Lactoid.
Yeah, so I am in favor of cash bail, just across the board. It should not be removed. We do need some kind of process to put it in the accused's interest to actually come back and face justice. I mean, I can't tell you how often it happens in the criminal justice system or in court generally, how hard it is to get people to make their court dates and how difficult it is for people to actually come back. Bail is really the only way we've figured out how to do it, right? I do think the situation, though, I'm going to comment on this situation in a second, but I do think the situation eliminates the need that bail should probably be reformed. I actually think for certain crimes, bail should be higher. And I think who can pay bail perhaps needs to be restricted. Because so the judge actually understands what pool of funds are accessible to the person when they have to make bail, because that's an important calculation to this too. And there also probably needs to be stricter monitoring for those accused of violent or certain property crimes prior to being released on bail. The lawsuit itself is complete bogus, though. The current system is it's the law. If someone else wants to put their own finances at risk and bail somebody out, they are free to. I think the idea that the Bail Project was negligent and that they should have known that engaging in this legal process could lead to some downstream effects, such as a criminal getting out and committing a crime, is such a stretch. And it runs afoul of proximate cause, and it runs afoul of what the court system allows. It's just, I'm actually surprised they were even able to sue. I think if anything, this shows that the courts were wrong for giving this guy a bail of only $3,000. So yes, bail, no lawsuit.
Thanks so much. Opening statement, Scott.
So, surprisingly, I'm going to disagree with everything Lactoid said. Number one, The reason that the suit is going forward is because they never registered as a bail agent. And there are certain, like, it shouldn't really matter, and they go through the same process anyways, but that's why they're able to sue, right? So I wouldn't say that it's necessarily fully bogus, but there is something. Furthermore, I'm completely against bail. Bail is kidnapping people against their will that have not been proven to be innocent. But then you say, well, okay, well, what do you do until people get their trial date, right? Like we have a bail system set up, and the idea is that, you know, you pay roughly 10% down, or someone in your family does, and they kind of take out a loan, assuming that you'll show up to court and that you'll behave moderately well during that period of time. And when these, you know, NGOs get involved, they kind of destroy that process, because the idea is that bail is set based off of the income that is available to the people at the time. And so, you know, it's not like their auntie and uncle and, you know, family coming together to get funds to, you know, to like, and there's a social pressure that exists within the bail system, right, from your family. And this is exploiting the weakness in the bail system, right? This is leftist organizations taking someone who had, you know, had been arrested for, you know, bullshit gun crimes, and then while awaiting trial commits another crime, gets a violent crime, and then gets bail from these people and commits another violent crime, right? Like, it's almost like, well, who could have fucking predicted that? Well, anybody with any fucking common sense could have predicted that he was going to offend again, because he was getting remanded on bail because he offended again, right? Like, he never should have been let out. And so the real question is, well, what do we do instead of bail? And what we should be doing instead of bail is we should stop locking people up for nonviolent crimes, period. We should stop arresting people for nonviolent crimes like drug crimes. And this should clear up our justice system so that people that are involved in violent crimes should have a right to a fair and speedy trial, like they're supposed to, not a trial 6 months later. And if a grand jury or a judge finds that you're a violent individual and there's enough evidence to go forward for trial, I don't care how rich you are, you don't get out of jail. What you get is you get your trial. And if you're found to be innocent, or you're found to be some impropriety in the grand jury proceedings or something like that, then you should be paid restitution by the state for the kidnapping that you endured, because it shouldn't have gone to trial in the first place. And so, yeah, we should get rid of bail. And this is an example of the downstream effects of the left exploiting a weak system and not actually caring about order, not actually caring about natural law, but instead trying to destroy institutions and systems that they disagree with, because they don't actually have any philosophical principles. This person never should have been let out. And yeah, he should have stayed in jail with no bail.
All right, we'll just leave that alone for now. Corey, please.
Well, I'm actually going to echo a lot of the same sentiments that Scott just went through, in that I have no philosophical principles. No, the earlier parts. Well, it's where, like, I think this is an article that I think is just a testament to how poorly, you know, both Canada and the U.S. deals with crime, and a testament to, you know, how much prison reform is needed. Where, like, it's pretty clear, as much as they might market it, like, the prison system has nothing to do with rehabilitation.
God damn, Silver Ogre.
Where it's like, one of the key phrases that, like, stood out to me in the article, which is, like, sort of like secondary, like, the specific wording was like, they mentioned he reportedly was released without bail and ordered to stay out of trouble, as if, like, ordering to stay out of trouble for, like, a repeat offender or criminal like that's really gonna, like, solve the problem. It's just, like, ridiculous. But what I will say to answer the prompts, even though, like, my overall, let's say, guiding principles, like reform, prison reform, actually, like, rehabilitative justice. But in terms of, do I think the lawsuit against group has any merit? It doesn't, based off what Lactoid outlined in my limited understanding, it doesn't seem so, but I'm open to having my mind changed. And do I think they were wrong for releasing the criminal based off of, like, the system? I don't think they were wrong, but I do agree with Scott in that I do think bail should be abolished. And I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you so much. All right, let's go to Joe, who hopefully can hear us now.
Yeah, I can. Bail stupid. And there's problems with bail as it's currently constructed. Like, you want to make sure that people go to their trials. So you're going to need a support system in order for that to happen. Like, you can't just and this is something the Bail Project already does. Like, they're very good about making sure that these individuals who they post bail to, that's their responsibility. They're responsible for those individuals. However, they're responsible for those individuals to show up to court. You're not gonna you're not like stop like, oh, because I posted bail, stop doing crimes. And it's like, it's not how that shit works, friend. So because there are certain people, like, even when I was listening to different a lot of reactionaries covered this story, which is kind of cool, about like their takes about how they should have locked up this fucking and they just got all types of sideways left and right. But,
I'm sure that's what they were saying.
Generally speaking, the lawsuit's pretty stupid. I do believe that there is something to say in terms of accountability of registering with the proper insurance avenues in Las Vegas. That definitely was an oversight, but it appears like the Bail Project even agreed that was an oversight because they're doing restructuring. The timeline's really, really weird, but I guess it got into the news, if our time is short here, because the individual Rashawn Gasson Anderson, something of the sort, he got sentenced this past week. So he's, I think, like 7 to 18 years in prison, some shit like that. But yeah, generally, I think that like it's not the responsibility of the person posting bail to make sure they're not going to do crimes. It's their responsibility to make sure they appear to court. I don't know how this is going to be argued, but you know, we'll see what happens.
I should have said it before, but the guy, you can see his mugshot in the articles if you search for it. That guy is fucking perfect for this story. Holy shit. Right?
Yeah.
He is exactly the type of the scare your suburban white person.
Dude, he is a racist's wet dream. Like, he looks exactly like the
Perfect.
stereotypical like if someone was to say gangbanger and you were like, and your name happened to be Karen.
Scott's getting way too excited to talk about this.
That's exactly what you would imagine, and it's kind of ridiculous.
So there's no wonder this thing blew up. I'm not surprised reactionaries are discussing this. Johnny Scarlett, please.
Alrighty, so I am against bail for all nonviolent offenses. However, I do believe that bail could be necessary for violent offenses. However, if I was to have my way with it, I would probably include family or guardian sponsorship as well. Like, someone has to vouch for you and put up your bail for you. I would expect something like that to be a little bit more thought out in the way of risk assessment. And risk assessment is also something that prisonpolicy.org has looked at, and it turns out that most people who pose bail still return to, or who are in a position to not have to post bail because of new policy set in by around 2017 by about 9 cities that were studied. If people are given the opportunity to not post bail and to get out, they still, by and large, around the same rate, return for their trial. Also, even if you were to say, well, maybe the numbers are fudged a little bit on that, there is a massive decrease in prison population when you enact these policies. And so feeding and housing people, it costs money, and it's estimated that around 75% of people currently waiting trial are actually innocent, and most of those obviously are nonviolent. So I think that some bail good, some bail bad, most bail bad, probably.
So eloquent. Thank you so much, Johnny. Let's go to Bilbo.
So I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know anything about if the lawsuit has any merit. I would say, just based on what I understand bail to mean, is that they are solely fiscally responsible for him appearing in court and has nothing to do with whether or not he's going to reoffend, right? So I'm not super sure. I mean, you can sue them, I guess. I mean, they let it go through, right? Now, so on bail, as the subject of bail itself, I would say that there's a lot of crimes where bail is probably not good. Like, if they're talking about, like, you're arrested for killing a bunch of people, like the Waukesha guy, he probably shouldn't have like $1 million bail or whatever it was, right? I don't think you get to just walk out of jail because you have enough money. That seems pretty not good. And I think that there could be a lot of changes to how we do bail. I understand there has to be some kind of way to make sure that people show up to court or whatever. But I don't know if I would necessarily call it a poor tax, but it feels very much like poor people are going to be the ones that are fucked the most hard by something like this. And generally, I'm against that sort of thing. So I would say, I don't know if we should abolish bail, but maybe something like restricting it only to certain like repeat offenders can get no bail at all, and anyone that's doing violent offenses probably no bail there.
Thank you so much, and Doobie.
I actually love punishing poor people when they do shitty things, but I think in this case, as much as I dislike the bail system, I think the problem here wasn't with this organization; it was the fact that bail is available at all. Right, he probably shouldn't have been granted bail. I think we grant that option to too many people. So yeah, I think that's what it is.
Okay. We have one more person coming, so hopefully they'll be here soon. But open to the panel.
Lactoid.
Wait, real quick. I just want to clarify just some. I heard something. I just wanted to make sure. About 75% of people currently awaiting trial are legally innocent. The Innocence Project puts it at about between 2 and 7% of people actually convicted are actually innocent. The vast majority of people who are accused and convicted of crimes actually did it, right? Well over 90%. So we obviously don't want to risk like even a small portion of people, innocent people, going to prison. So, but this does affect a relatively small percentage of actually innocent people.
Oh, excuse me. Let me actually amend that a little bit. About 70% of people held by jail are legally innocent and awaiting trial. And absolutely, that was a misread on my part. Thank you so much for pointing that out.
Yeah. So, and that's important, I think, because I wanted to also agree with Scott. Yeah, legalize all drugs, legalize prostitution, 100%, and that would help clear up a lot. But
the dockets would be way less if you got rid of nonviolent drug crimes.
Well, here's the problem, right? Where the dockets are now, it's fucking it's terrible. And nonviolent drug crimes don't really take up a huge amount of court resources because most of the time they're gonna.
There's a second charge, yeah. Usually
right,
you're caught with something.
Usually, but for the nonviolent ones, you're gonna plead out. They get handled really quickly because there's really not a lot that goes into it. There's not like you go through victims, statements and all the other procedures.
Right. The problem, but the problem is like you're talking about the immediate impact, right? And what I'm talking about is like people being locked up at all for nonviolent drug offenses, right? And then what does that do to them, and how does that change the recidivism rate, right? Because you have a lot of people going to jail that then end up going into what you might call a life of crime, right? Because of the influences of the war on drugs, right?
Right. I'm very skeptical, though, generally speaking, that even though I agree with you that we should legalize all drugs, I don't think that this would make it thus that a speedy trial could happen like within a week or two. Like we're still looking at like 5, 6, 7, 8 months.
No, I mean what I advocate for would actually probably put more on the docket in some ways, right? Because you'd need a more strict process to determine if someone is put in jail. Like you'd need a grand jury for a bunch of shit that you wouldn't normally use a grand jury for if you got rid of the bail system. The problem here, right, is, and I don't see anybody looking at first principles here, except for maybe Joe, right? Because Joe's just against it, right? Joe and I probably the only people thus far, maybe Corey, I don't know if we actually Corey as well. In that the problem is you can look at the downstream effects as much as you want, but what you really have to look at is, well, what is bail? Bail is taking money from people who have not been convicted of a crime whatsoever, right? On the presumption of a crime to try and ensure that they come back to court. And it doesn't seem that actually has much impact. Like most of the research shows that like bail or no bail, that it's about the same rate of a returning, right? The other thing is that when we look at like, even when we look at like recidivism rates, like even people that go to jail for violent crimes, a third of them end up getting back into jail and convicted of violent crimes, right? And so the question, so if you have a bail system and then you have people bail people out, and then you go, well, see, this guy committed another violent crime. It's like, dude, even if he had gone to jail, which is supposed to help you, right, and came back out, a third of those people would have committed violent crimes again anyways, right? So you should expect some people that post bail to commit violent crimes, because even if they were convicted and went to jail and got out, some of those people would commit violent crimes. And so
Can I ask you,
I'm for getting rid of
OJ.
racket.
Can I ask you, Scott, what do you think should have happened? What do you think should have happened to this guy? So like they bailed him out, but like, so it seems like you have a problem with bail in that just because you are accused of a crime, the jail can hold you and charge you money until you pay them money, right? So what do you think should have happened to this guy? Should he have been held in jail?
Well, I think they should have done a grand jury. And considering that this person was convicted, I have no doubt that a grand jury where the prosecutor is the only one really putting forward the evidence, and it's a little bit quicker process, that he would have been found worthy of going to court. And I don't think he should have gotten bail at all. I don't think he should have been let out. Right? I think when you're a repeat offender and there's evidence and there's, tons of evidence that can convict somebody, I don't understand how you end up back on the streets. I don't care how rich or poor you are.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think the order to stay out of trouble was just not strong enough. You need stronger orders to stay out of trouble.
Right.
So like something that I do, I have a circle of former BLA members that like, and we're all kind of friendly with each other, and we just kind of like talk about politics and just like Jersey politics and just like kind of the state of people in America. And something that they've been like really sort of just because again, like we're kind of in like part 5,000 of Free a Shot of Secure, in this case partner, and it's really interesting in how like, because I asked him this question about bail before this like panel started, and something that one of my friends said was like, look, bail is a test to see if you have a community and resources. That's like the practical function. And I never really heard it argued like that. And in a way, it kind of makes sense. It basically sells a criminal or someone alleged of a crime. Do you have the resources in place in order to not only make sure that you appear to trial, which is the first function of bail, but then the second function, which is like sort of like a strenuous or detached from it, is if you have a community to make sure that you'll behave leading up to that. And it is clear that like, sure, you can have an outside community, an outside group of people post your bail, but it's still the responsibility of whatever community that exists around you to make sure that you are responsible for your actions and that you are on that path so you don't lead to additional problems and additional situations that put you in harm's way. Because like the thing that they were talking about is that like if I'm just going to kind of paraphrase the conversation broadly, like if they're going to post up a nigga for bail, they're going to make sure that they have like to make sure that nigga's out of trouble. And I was like, wow, that's like a good way of putting it, where it's like, and it's not a matter of like I'm posting bail to be responsible for your ass in terms of like policing you, but I'm going to make sure that you like the only thing that you should be worrying about between now and the court date is the court date. So what are you doing to make sure you're staying out of trouble? What are you doing to make sure the cops don't fuck with you if you get pulled over on some bullshit? Like what are you making sure, like, because again, like you want to like
that's
like
that's
like
the
that's
issue.
something-
That's the issue with like an NGO getting involved, right? Is that the community isn't the one putting forward the money, and so the incentive isn't for there to be that social pressure to return, right? Like if your community or your family like posts bail for you, there's a lot of social pressure there to make sure that you're responsible because they're liable for additional monies, right? If you don't show up to your court date. And so when you have an NGO involved, right? But when you have an NGO, you're kind of pointing to the problem though of organizations like this getting involved, is because it's not the community, it's not the family that is ensuring that the individual goes back to court. It's like an amorphous outside organization.
I'm saying the community failed him insofar as he didn't have a community around him that would make sure that he doesn't fall into the same type of traps, the same type of pitfalls of having additional charges on his record. That's the point.
The community failed the guy who shot the
I was
waiter.
about to say, right? Right.
Well,
They shot him 11
maybe,
times.
maybe before that, I don't know that there's a huge.
Maybe he failed the community. Like maybe he fucked up. Like why do we look to a community? Because like I'm sure there are plenty of other individuals who grew up in that community that aren't going around shooting people. Like why isn't it just his fuck up?
I know this is a very dry conversation, but we don't need to be dramatic about things.
Wait, how is this dramatic?
We can recognize because you're doing the thing where like,
what thing?
The topic's pretty boring and we gotta drive the content.
No, I'm asking you to fucking justify what you just said. So because it seems like what you're implying is that if a criminal in a community does harm to their fucking community, it's somehow the community's fault that the criminal did this to them. Like I'm asking you why that's the case. Why is it wrong to say that he failed, he fucked up, and he damaged his community?
That's
no,
not,
you can
that's
respond.
not
I
what
don't
I
think
said.
the topic's boring though, but okay.
No, it's not that it's boring. It's just that.
Well, what Joe does when he gets any kind of pressure is he folds and pretends it's all trolling, and he's not serious, and he's not going to engage. He's just a bitch. So Joe, start engaging.
There's the truth. There's the truth. There's the truth. How you feel.
Yeah, I think you're acting like a bitch. So start engaging.
Joe, please.
We can
Go
move
ahead.
on from this.
Then Johnny.
Yeah, we can move on from this.
I'll yield to Johnny.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, and this is an issue that just came up to me about my suggestion of guardianship or family sponsorship, because sometimes in communities that have people who are acting out, those communities are failing them not just by not showing up for them, but by perhaps giving them too much leniency. So think about the person who always bails their family member out. Think about the doting grandmother or something like that who raised this person, and then this person turned out enablers. Is exactly, yeah. Think about the enablers in the community who would sponsor someone to get out of jail and then watch them go and make the same decisions. This is something that can't exclusively be solved by money or by a community, it seems.
We kind of got to walk and chew gum at the same time. Like, we got to make sure that people, because of how the bail system works, if they don't have the resources, but they're able to demonstrate that, hey, like, I treat this seriously. I need to go to trial, and I understand I want to be held accountable for my actions. I'm going to go to trial for that. Then there shouldn't be some $5,000 paywall that says, well, actually, we don't think you're going to. And granted, there's different reasons why bail is posted. But at the same time, you want to also recognize that you have a responsibility, and we have a responsibility, that you don't fuck up between the time that you make it out on bail to the time of your court date. In this situation, a bunch of people failed him.
No,
like,
I don't.
He's
I don't.
responsible.
How do
but
I
the
have
community around him is
responsibility for the people in my fucking neighborhood to show up to court? Like, that's absurd.
We can recognize that people have different community systems. So it's like, who's your family? Who are your friends? Who are the people you associate with? I don't understand why this is a difficult thing.
Okay, so which one of it?
Because it's collective responsibility, and with collective responsibility comes collective guilt.
Community circle, his community.
We got rid of that with the Nuremberg trials. Like, we don't need to bring back collective guilt.
I don't even know what that word meant. We can recognize
that's not surprising, actually.
We can recognize that the community, his internal community failed him. It's not that difficult.
Okay, let's go back to it, and then Corey.
I'm struggling with this because I think there's a lot of good points that are being made. I think I am. So I'm actually going to agree with like violent criminals probably shouldn't get bail, and they should probably be put in the very top of the docket, and they should be addressed immediately. Right.
Yes.
For people accused of non-violent property crimes, which I mean, I only think the only crimes that should exist are crimes that have victims, right? But where somebody's not necessarily a threat to the community, and their docket's like further on down the line, I think I still want some kind of system in place that allows them to get out, because keeping somebody in jail sucks, right? Especially if they're not guilty, and especially if it's a crime that the risk here is relatively low. I mean, burglary and gun charges, maybe not, right? But if, let's say, somebody like is charged with, I don't know, stealing like some art piece, or running away with some money in somebody's house. One idea that a friend of mine actually had, and I had a hard time arguing against it. It actually kind of makes sense. You know how there's like the ankle bracelets, like home monitoring, right? One of the issues is that people will cut them. What if like you? It sounds kind of wild, but what if you had like the ankle bracelets that had a GPS monitor in them that also function a little bit like a shock collar? So if you try if you try to cut them, like it's electrified, and so it'll deliver like a non-lethal taser kind of level of electricity.
Oh, God.
Or if you try to leave the city, it'll also like release like electricity until you come back to the city. So I know it sounds crazy, but like,
you know, you could
work.
You could put an anvil on top of their front door. That way, when they open it, it crushes them. That way, they can't leave.
I'm not trying to kill them.
Like, listen, we
taser people who run away. I don't know why
you're saying that
we
need, for every criminal needs a Suge Knight outside of their house at all times. I agree.
So true.
Suge Knight is terrifying, and I'm sure Suge Knight can just go knock. These copies of Suge Knight can just come knock on the door and be like, "You behaving, nigga?" And it's like, "Yeah, I'm doing okay. I'll be outside." And it's like, I'm sure
you can get the bail pretty low, right? Because it's not like money that's keeping you going to court now. It's pain compliance. Like
like that's why I'm saying Suge Knight would be a very good opportunity, because you have the choice.
I think he's busy. I'm not sure we can have Suge Knight police the whole country.
Well, what about Shaft?
If we know anything about the criminal justice system, he's probably not doing much right now.
No, the problem is you have to take this back. You have to take this back to core principles, right? The real issue here is that these people have not been proven guilty. Okay? They have not been proven guilty. So you have the state certainly has no right to kidnap these people or to make them do a goddamn thing other than to show up to their court date. If the state has enough information to convict them of a crime, right, that involves a victim, right, then until they pay restitution for that crime, they're stopped from arguing nothing be done against them that could lead towards paying that restitution. Okay? And so if someone is a violent criminal and you can do a grand jury proceeding and determine that there's enough evidence to go to trial, fuck you, you sit in jail. And if there was some sneaky shit going on with the grand jury, or they're found innocent, then you can pay restitution to the people that you kidnapped. And if not, then fuck you, stay in jail. And if it's a non-violent crime, bail is nothing more than an extortion racket for tax dollars. Period.
I mean nonviolent crime and a crime that we agree should be a crime. So like Grand Theft Auto, or steal some shit out of your house. Like that should be a crime, right, Scott? I mean,
let's go.
I'm confused because you mentioned something like
you shouldn't get out.
Wait, but you mentioned something about property and that like things need to have people for crime. Can you like clarify what you meant in your first initial statement before you got on like the dog collar argument?
Right. I'm against the idea of the victimless crime. So people being arrested for nonviolent drug use, choosing what to put in their own body, people being arrested for prostitution, being able to choose what they want to do with their own body. I mean, there's no victim there. When it comes to like, if I punch somebody, there is a clear victim. If I burn someone's house down, there is a clear victim.
And then you would make the argument then like car theft, there's a clear victim then.
Exactly. Right.
And that's just all cases of car theft, or just cases where. So like if I like what's the difference between me like and again like don't do crimes people, like me stealing a car in somebody's home in the private residence versus stealing somebody's car in a parking lot? Is there like a difference for you in those two scenarios?
Someone owns the car.
Yeah. So sure, I don't see a difference. I'm trying to find the
path of victimhood here.
Well, so the path of victimhood is you just jacked my car, regardless of whether my car was in my driveway or in a public parking lot or anywhere.
You mean like an example like a junkyard where
so like if I go in so like for example if I go to some junkyard and then I steal that car, that I find a way to make it function and get it out of there, you consider that a crime with a victim, or you
assuming the junkyard owns the vehicle? Yeah, you just stolen from the junkyard owner.
Okay, so you have certain exceptions to individual property when it comes to victims then.
How's that an exception?
No, I'm saying you have like you keep a pathway of like property and owning something, and if that is taken from somebody, you consider that person a victim. I'm just trying to.
Yes, if you steal material from somebody, they are now a victim of theft.
It's actually simple, right? An individual has.
I got it. It's cool. I got it.
Wait, Joe, don't you agree with that?
No, I'm just trying to understand what you were saying. Why is it? It's not
Okay, but now that you
God
understand, do you agree?
How
that,
dare you, Joe? Understand things.
I'm not taking a stance on this. I wanted to understand what you were saying.
Well, so this should be a pretty easy thing to take a stance on. Though.
I didn't understand what you said initially, so I asked questions and you answered. We can move on.
I want an answer to my question now. You asked me some questions, Joe.
An individual has self-autonomy, right? And because an individual has self-autonomy, they establish private property by mixing their labor with commodities,
people see themselves in the objects that they own. Okay.
Well, no, like
something in the object that you own. If somebody commits an act on that object, it's an extension of yourself. I'm on board with that.
Well, it's not that they see something of that; it's that their labor is inherently mixed with the private property owners.
They see themselves within the object they have.
Right,
but like if somebody stole my saxophone, I'd blast him in the middle of the street. Like, is that the answer you wanted me to say, Lactoid?
Well, it's not that they see themselves. It's not that they see themselves in the object that they own. It's that their labor is intrinsically
It's directly tied to my self-determination as an individual expressing myself in a free society.
Right. So if you smoke weed on your front porch, right? Then the idea that this is a crime, there's no victim.
Actually,
if someone stole my weed, we're gonna have problems.
Oh yeah,
that's different because that's your property.
Cash bail, everybody, cash bail.
Corey's been waiting. And if there's anyone else who wants to go next, let me know.
Wait, I want Joe's answer before.
You'll get it after Corey. I just want to make sure Corey gets.
I'll try to be quick. I can't guarantee it though. And who knew that this would be the spiciest topic? So Lactoid. So I wanted to ask you earlier in terms of, because I wasn't able to do a lot of research before the panel, but you're probably more informed of these things than I am, given your occupation, where it's like, it seems like bail is often used as the tool to get people to show up to their court date, but as sort of like based off of sort of my cursory research and what Scott alluded to, like it doesn't seem to be all that effective anyways, and that there's still like some clear failures with that, and just like even as a tool in and of itself for its intended goal and purpose, it seems to be like not effective at all. And so like why continue like to use it? And the last thing, I'll let you answer it, but the last thing that I wanted to not necessarily ask you, but to just like throw out there, I think Doobie touched upon something earlier, even though I don't agree with their position of like, the community failing this person, as in, there were multiple instances prior to their, most violent of crimes for intervention. Either from the community or from social services or the state. There were multiple pathways to maybe lead them to a different path or outcome, and that I think that clearly didn't happen. Where it seems like the only thing that would happen is like they were ordered to stay out of trouble. Clearly not effective. If you're able to answer Lactoid or provide clarification.
The first question. I've seen those studies, right? There's some studies which, there's certain areas that have stopped collecting cash bail for a very limited selection of low severity crimes, and there doesn't seem to be a statistically significant impact on recidivism or personal recognizance. I find that incredibly interesting. It's incredibly counterintuitive. You would think that if your money's at play, you'd be more likely to go back.
It's not counterintuitive at all.
So let me just explain. If I had to put up 30 grand and I knew that if I didn't show up, that I'm not getting that money back, I would be more likely to go back because
I
want my 30 grand back.
It's real simple, right? Because you're looking at it in isolation instead of the whole criminal justice system, right? So if we get rid of the bail aspect, if you don't show up to court, what happens? Bail or no bail?
Right. I mean, you get
new charges. The police have more crimes upon, right? You're likely gonna go to jail without bail, right? So like the incentive is not that different, right? Because the incentive of one with the bail is additional financial liability, but even without the bail, you still have additional criminal charges, and you still have the likelihood that they come after you.
Right.
So the type of person that is willing to go out on bail and not show up to court is also the same person that likely doesn't give a fuck about the additional criminal charges.
Right.
And the type of person that gives a fuck about additional criminal charges is also the same type of person that show up for bail.
I get that, but at the same time, like with the bail, would simply it would just add like, because this is just a question of, do we just have a signature bonds or do we have you actually put up funds? And like either or, you're still gonna face extra charges if you bail jump. It's a felony, and in my state at least, in a lot of states. But it also doesn't make sense because losing a bunch of money would also seem to be an additional deterrent, right? Like not only are you going to get a felony, you're also missing out on 40 grand.
Yeah, but you and I both know that like after 25 years, for example, like the deterrence between like whether or not you murder someone, right, doesn't matter after 25 to life or the death penalty. That people aren't more, that they're not more likely to be deterred from a crime once it's at a certain level. And what I'm saying is it's already at a certain level if you don't show up to court and you're going to get more criminal charges, etc. Or put it another way, violent criminals that don't show up to court don't give a fuck that their mom put $1,000 on.
Well, and that's why I agree that like violent criminals maybe not, but we also over a certain amount, yes, deterrence goes down, but that's also because of the lack of immediacy, and people who tend to commit crimes are generally impulsive anyway. But when we're talking about like immediacy, you immediately lose all the money you put up. Like there is evidence that shows that like short-term punishments are very effective deterrents at like preventing people from doing crime in the future. And so it would seem to me that if not only do you get a felony, but you also lose 40 grand. Like intuitively, that would seem to me to work better than just saying you get a felony.
Look at it psychologically though, right? Like, so let's say we have bail for two different people, right? The number one, the first one is like some type of like an accountant that steals money, right? That like embezzles money from a company.
That's unheard of.
Right? So an accountant that embezzles money, they embezzled like 100 grand. They're going to court for that. And they got out on bail, right? Now, with or without the bail, do you think that person shows up to court?
I guess it depends on the crime, but if they think they have a good chance of like, either if they're sentenced,
unless they think they can evade the country, right? They're probably showing up to court. They're probably terrified of the criminal justice system. Now let's look at a violent criminal that like robbed a store at gunpoint, right? I don't think the bail makes that much of a difference as to whether or not they give a fuck about showing up to court.
Sure. So when you bring up like a white collar, like law, minded person, like an accountant, maybe. But I'm thinking about what this primarily is going to affect, like a poor person who, if they get a felony, okay, they got to sit in a cage and get free food and healthcare and water for a few years, maybe. Like it sucks in certain ways, yes. But I mean, compared to their standard of living outside of prison, there's not that much of a disparity compared to like a wealthy accountant.
Wow.
But now it's just true, right? But now we're talking about like, okay, you're poor, and this is 30 grand that your whole family had to raise, and if you renege, like if you walk away from this, now your mom loses her house. Like, I don't know. I mean, is that not like an incentive? Are these people just completely heartless?
I think you're an orderly person that would show up to court, and you're having difficulty putting your mind in the space of someone that like commits a lot of these fucking crimes.
Maybe we just have bail for orderly people.
Why are these people orderly people?
I have an idea for Lactoid. You were giving me serious Barbara Bush vibes there. No, like in the hurricane that hit an area, and she was like, "Oh yeah, these people, black people who were filling up like a gymnasium. Oh, aren't their lives better here? It looks like in this little gymnasium, and
you're still in jail, right? Like you're still in prison.
Yeah,
you're not free.
I know a lot of people that want to go to prison.
I think Lactoid really wants to go to prison. And here's the thing. I think that what we can do is we can call up TLC, one of those places that has all that drama content, and we got to get Lactoid a contract. So I can see it now. Hey, I'm Lactoid. I'm a lawyer. I'm going to reform the bail system, so I'm going to make sure these people show up. And then like he just gets a list of people in every episode. He's just making sure people behaving, and then like I want to see him just tackle some 15-year-old over some candy. It'd be cool. It'd be cool content.
I've met people that want to go to jail because like they have a hard time finding food and shelter outside of it. Right.
I thought that was going to go.
And you know what?
Yeah.
And you know what? If that's the case for that person, bail or no bail, they'll probably show up to court if they want to go to jail.
No, I know. I'm talking about like the edge cases where you have somebody who like poor people who don't have difference in living standards between somebody in prison and somebody who's like dirt poor. There's not that much of a disparity compared to like, I don't know, like if you're like SBF or whatever, and you got to go to a prison. I mean, that's like a pretty massive jump.
Yeah, but that's county though, Lactoid. We know county's lit.
I don't know.
Like in certain area, I mean, like in Jersey, that's like the big thing. It's like if you go to county, you're chilling. If you go to prison, you're fucked. And that's like, and like some people are willing to, because I hear this, is that they're willing to wait in county because being in county is better than being outside. But for a lot of people, prison ain't it. Like prison's the one you want to avoid.
Doobie, were you trying to jump in there? I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious because I consider there might be like issues with the bail system too, right? So if you're like genuinely like innocent and you're broke, but you're like in there for like a month or some shit, like your life's fucked, right? So I can definitely like empathize with that. But I wonder, like, what do you guys think about a system where, which I think is something similar to what they have in like New Jersey, where they have like some kind of algorithm that judges the risk of this person, coming back to court or whatever the fuck, like how big a risk there is of their flight risk. Yeah, flight risk.
Recidivism algorithm got thrown out in our state.
And I think the prosecutors have like 5 days or some shit to prevent like serious evidence that would justify keeping them behind bars, right? And if they can't, then they get set free. What do you guys think about a similar system to that? But even for a poor person, 5 days out of work, you're still fucked, right? So what about like a system like that, but where like in addition to that, they have to give you restitution for holding you for 5 days, and it needs to be more than you would have made during those days at work. And if you get fired for them holding you,
so that in my opening was that if you're found innocent, you deserve recidivism. You deserve.
No, I don't even mean like the innocent thing. I mean like if you've been held for 5 days and in those 5 days they don't come up with enough evidence to keep you there till trial, then you get set free and you get restitution immediately for those days if they held you.
Just to be clear, what Doobie's talking about is our public safety assessment. At first, it just targeted Black people. That was kind of cool. So then they got a couple, and they got those stats were not cool, but it's cool now. So basically, what essentially is it does an analysis of a defendant on their risk level and how likely they are able to appear. How do I word this? How likely they are to fail to appear in court, and then other different risk factors, and then they get a number, and then it's just a bunch of other stuff about it. There's a bunch of different analysis over the years, because every year they try to make sure that it's fair and equitable. It's pretty okay, but like it's essentially we call it PRA, but.
Did you want to respond? Or
the problem with those programs is that they're non-voluntary, right? When you have a criminal justice system that is non-voluntary, where the state has a monopoly, and then you start engaging in thought crimes on whether or not someone be released, you're in really fucking dangerous territory, to say the least. Right now, I would have no problem with a system like that was privatized and was like increase or decrease your insurance rates to cover you for like a rights enforcement agency or something like that, because you could choose or not choose which company you wanted to represent you. But when you're talking about a system that determines whether or not you should be let out on release based off of statistics, Joe showed the initial problem right ahead, right? It's going to look at the fact that Black people are more likely to commit crime. And then it's just going to be like, oh, well, you're Black, so that's a black mark, and it's going to look at, but it wasn't even looking at race; it was looking at like neighborhood that you're in, right? And just so happened to be that things like that. So it just shouldn't be a part of the process anymore.
So yeah, the reason why the PSA is so successful is because it doesn't just target Black people. At first, they had a lot of people who weren't directly involved in communities when creating this algorithm and creating the things that they assess. But the idea of it is a simple question. Based upon everything that exists in your life, are you not only going to appear in court, but also are you going to behave outside of court? And that's basically the TLDR of that. And I mean, there's a bunch, and again, it gets revised every year. There's a bunch of different reports about it. Like, I can send you documents, but I know libertarians don't like books because liberation. So.
But
I never even came after you for bringing up the fact that you were hanging out with Black Liberation Army people. But like, you're gonna
Black people
fucking
turn
be
out to
weird
if and they can be members of organizations outside of it, because the BLA is defunct, but they are former BLA members.
Let's go to Corey.
But to answer your question, Doobie, or at least as best I can, and I'm not going to say like this is my official position that I'm locked in, but intuitively based off what you outlined and what Scott alluded to earlier in terms of like restitution, I think on a case by case basis, depending on the nature of the crime, like I have no, intuitively, I would say like, yeah, it might be better to like, hold them in jail, and that like whatever potential like lost income would be some more, where it's like, yeah, they should be compensated, and that might be like a little bit of incentive to like speed up the process of getting them through the system, so that we're not like, prolonging.
It's a state-based system. There's no like financial incentives don't matter to the state because they'll just tax you more. It's taxed.
Wait, what if we gave them, like, if you had to go back to work or something, we gave like them the option of like the shock collar or whatever? So like,
Wait, you said shock
because then if you're
collar?
there for like 15 minutes, right?
Bro, Lacto, do you want a dog? Is that what we're trying to do right now? Is this an intervention? Do you want a fluffy puppy?
My neighbor got an invisible fence and it works. So
Wait, I don't understand it. Why?
I wouldn't be opposed to it.
I'm made of questions. So how do you know the invisible fence exists?
Well, the dog walks out of it, the yelp, and they go back in.
Have you gone through? Are you trying to tell us something here, Lacto?
It's a product.
The dog obeys the invisible fence.
It's very
the dog walks out, it gets shocked, and it runs back in.
Do you have evidence to convict? If you do, fuck you. You stay in jail. Do you not have evidence to convict?
So how do you know that without a trial?
You go free. Well, you can do a grand jury proceeding.
That, first of all, that is not immediate, and even then, like, grand juries are imperfect for a lot of reasons, right?
Yeah,
I agree. A full jury,
they're biased in the prosecution's favor. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then you pay restitution afterwards if the person is found innocent.
Right. A full
you
jury
shouldn't be letting people that are suspected that you have evidence to convict of out onto the fucking streets, bail or no bail.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to be paying we're going to be paying a lot of restitution. I mean, it seems to me that we could lessen our tax burden, right, if we let these people go instead of like with the collars, if it actually works.
Oh wait, like why do you want specifically a shock collar? I think we have other technologies that might be
like what?
Well, so I don't know the numbers in terms of like you say cutting those whatever bracelets is a problem. Like I don't know how much of a problem like it is.
It's relatively easy.
And I imagine that might just be an engineering problem. I have no doubt that if we invested heavily enough in designing a better bracelet, and that doesn't seem like an impossible like puzzle to solve of like just allowing people free and having the ability to track them.
What you're talking about is just something that goes around the bracelet that could electrocute you anyway if you attempt to get out of it. That's the first thing that comes to my mind, technologically at least.
We need to be investing in black magic. We need to put a curse on the grounds of their house.
There we go.
And if they step out, it's like a little doll. You just have a government agent sitting outside their house with a van. They're watching them. If they step outside of the house, they just rip the doll's head right off.
I guess actually you probably Corey, I think maybe you're right. Like maybe we wouldn't. If instead of like one of these little fucking like little flimsy bracelet things, like it was like a serious hunk of titanium that was like bolted around your leg, where
you need jaws of life to get out of it.
Yeah, the only way you're getting that off is like some ridiculous like procedure which no one's going to be able to do. Why don't we do that now? Like what the fuck?
Well, one, that'd be super expensive, and like two, like you have to consider people's mobility when you're doing that. Just like a massive.
I'm sure he doesn't literally mean like just a giant bell around their neck that they're just weighted down. But like, I'm sure like we have
pretty light.
yeah, fair enough. But I'm sure there can be some sort of like
someone will always find a way to get out of whatever it is that you put, right? Like that's just like.
Yeah, I'm not saying like
people underestimate criminals all the time.
I'm just saying
they like to think the criminals are stupid. They're not stupid. They're just not risk averse.
No, but just making more challenge. Like I'm sure there's like anything is escapable. I'm just saying like I'm sure we can increase the challenge and burden such that it's like a very minimal problem.
Because that seems to be the solution, right? Because of the before all this technology, bail was like the only idea, right? But if we come up with some system where like just we know where you are with like GPS at all times, like you can't get out of it. And if you violate it, we know exactly where you are. We're coming from you for non-violent.
If you wanted to do
that, perfect solution.
All you need to do is have a loop of the electrical wire in the fucking strap, right? And if you cut it off, then it sends a signal because you.
Yeah,
they currently do.
Yeah, and that works already. Like it's just you don't have the manpower. Like people just don't respond to them. That's the only reason it doesn't work.
Wants to talk about the fringe cases. Fringe cases where they do get out.
You need a Suicide Squad style brain chip so that they can't leave.
Look, I'm not saying go that far.
Now you're being
but
ridiculous.
That's just
right.
ridiculous. Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, why wouldn't you go that far? I actually don't know.
Well, because you'll kill them. I
Well,
don't
no, I
wanna kill
mean, like,
these
if
people.
it
What if
wouldn't
it's
kill
like
them,
what
if
if
it's like an injectable, like let's say at the base of the skull, and it either electrocutes them or does something else terrible to them if they don't comply. How about that?
You could absolutely just dig that out of your skin. We're talking about non-risk averse people,
right.
people who would, yeah, exactly.
Why is this a serious part of the conversation?
I don't
Why
know.
are you
It's
bringing up
not a
Suicide
serious part of
Squad?
the conversation. You guys kept talking about it.
I'm
my
serious in
bad.
that I think technology could fix
Well,
this.
I'm serious in that I'm sure there can be something developed that overcomes that challenge of people cutting a braid. I'm not an engineer, but
I kind of want to focus in, but this actually gets us to a useful.
Are we still on
place
dog collars for criminals?
because I want to talk about what is the point of the bail system and our ability to coerce people back, right? Is it so important that we get people back, that we put in systems like I was talking about, right?
Yeah.
Or anything, is it that important? Or is having a justice system that acknowledges the humanity of the citizens more important?
I feel like it's the obvious answer, and so we're all kind of dancing around it. But all of these are problems that could be solved with more resources for the court system and faster turnaround and more people being hired in order to actually serve as advocates. I mean, a lot of this.
I like it.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think a greater court system. I don't think that addresses sure you can turn over more criminals, but that doesn't. I don't think that addresses crime per se.
No, well, I didn't think that we were addressing crime as a statistic.
Yeah,
I was under the impression that we were addressing the ability of people to go in and out of the court system as they are being proven guilty or innocent.
That's right.
Yeah. UB?
Yeah, I think in some ways the the bail system and coercing these people back or keeping them there and through the court process. I think in some ways that recognizes the humanity of the community, right? And that they have interests and they have concerns. And if you're just letting this person out, right, who has done something terrible, you're sending them back out into a real place, which is their community where they're likely to do more harm. Right. So I think that, we need to sacrifice the safety the freedom of the individual in these cases when they've been accused of serious crimes for the betterment of the community. I think
OJ should have probably stayed locked up.
Doobie, if you so you were saying that you don't like bail at all, right? You were saying you were agreeing with Scott that either have the evidence to put you in jail or to put up a serious prosecution, and then keep them in jail or let them go.
Yeah, I think so. I think if there's if it's something that isn't serious enough that you need to keep them behind bars, like let's say it's a weed charge or something, and I don't like drugs, right? I want to make that all illegal again. But let's say it's a drug charge, right? Like a small time first offender shit like that. There's probably not a good reason to keep them in prison, and given that there's no good reason to keep them there, right? If you just need them to show up at the next court date and go through the fucking process, why charge them with any kind of bail? It does just feel like a poor tack.
But is there But hold on. But is there a reason to collar them? And in your case, you're okay with the shocking. I knew that before Lactoid even fucking spoke. But Doobie, yeah. So you're thinking that even when they leave, we should still keep track of them, subject them to electronic surveillance, which limits their ability. If the point is to let them go, to do other things, right? Because we can trust them. What that electronic surveillance does is it severely limits them as to what they can do.
Right.
And it makes their lives actually very difficult and hard to earn a living. Mm-hmm. So you would still collar them somehow?
Yeah, absolutely. Because again, if they've committed a crime that's serious enough that they need to be, that there's a big question as to whether or not they should be let out. If we're going to provide that as a possibility at all, and I understand that probably should be a possibility in a lot of cases, because some of these people are innocent. They actually didn't do the thing they're being accused of. And if you keep them there for 2 weeks, their life's fucked, right? So we probably need to have that option on the table. But if it's something serious, like a fucking like a assault charge, or like assault with a deadly weapon, or like a robbery, or some crazy shit like this, right? Then yeah, you need to track them, right? If we're gonna let them out, they can go to work, they can do all the shit they need to do, and we can do our best to make sure that the court process isn't gonna take months. But if we're gonna let them walk around in their community, we need to make sure we know where they are.
All right, Scott, you're up. That's all you. That's all you.
I wanted to address this to both Doobie and Lactoid. We'll get back to you, Scott. To both Doobie and Lactoid. So you said, Lactoid, you're actually serious about shocking individuals, right?
Either shocking, or Corey's idea of like it being like just improving the current like monitoring bracelets to the point where like they really can't be tampered with, or at least the necessary expertise to tamper with them is going to be beyond 99.9% of criminals.
Well, maybe this applies less to you, Lactoid, but you can answer if you want. But I feel like if we are saying, and most people here seem to agree at the very least, that bail needs to be reformed, and that our current system is inadequate.
I'm gonna have to logic tree these
those
people
who think that it should just be like
it's the only way to
letting
get
them
out of
go,
this,
or keeping them in and getting rid of the money aspect, then if we are letting them go, shouldn't that be a testament that we are relatively confident that they aren't going to commit a crime in the first place? And if we are keeping them, shouldn't that be a testament to say that, well, this is a dangerous individual, that we have reason to believe that they might victimize again, or they just might not show up? So so my system would simply be that, right? Like, dangerous enough to recommit or reoffend, then we keep them in. If not, then we let them go. We don't have to even bother monitoring them at that point. So, but Doobie and Lactoid, let's hear what that's saying.
There's like a third category, right, of people who aren't really like dangerous to the point where we're worried about them statistically committing murder or some kind of violent crime, right? But we are kind of worried about them like skipping town or disappearing.
Well, that's attached to it. Like, if you don't think they're going to show up, then don't let them out.
Oh wait, no, but
that could be like everybody. Like, where are we going to draw the lines there?
I mean, under your system, I'm sure it would be like everybody.
I don't want to keep everybody in jail, right? It's a huge expenditure.
I'm saying your criteria would maybe include everybody, but I think most people, the vast majority of individuals, when they're outside, they're going to come back, right? Like when they're out on bail or whatever, they planning on coming back. So I will leave it up to that. If for whatever reason we think they believe, whether they be rich or poor, or violent or non-violent, then you keep them in.
It just seems like this gives us a little bit of like wiggle room, right? It gives us this kind of buffer of, we're not sure, like, obviously you can't be 100% sure, and we're not 100% sure that this person's not going to either commit a crime or skip town. But now that we're presented with the situation where we don't really want to keep somebody here who hasn't been proven guilty for a very long time, we put this kind of like monitoring system on them, and then we track them and make sure that they're not skipping town. We make sure that they're actually going from like work to home, and they're not going off into like, oh shit, you're going off into like other people's houses at 3:00 in the morning. What's going on, right? Like, to me, it seems like that would be a kind of a happy.
That's exactly what's wrong with the monitoring system in the first place.
But Private, you're not thinking like far enough. It's like Netflix subscriptions, but for criminals. So you have the chip, and then like if you don't want the chip because you don't like the flavors that the chip comes up, you can get the dog collar, because some people like that kinky shit. But then if the collar isn't your thing, I don't like feeling choked.
I am okay. I'm
trying to be.
So so I'm not sure I'm okay with
credit cards on the.
I'm not okay with charging them until they've been found guilty, right? But once they've been found guilty, I probably am okay with like charging back to them the cost of monitoring them, because that's what we do with people who were convicted of DUIs, right? You have to pay for the interlock device that you blow into to activate your engine.
So I wanted to again. So the problem with the monitoring, which I'm trying to get to, is that it limits you like that, like work to home. There was that incident just recently, a few months ago, right, where there was, I think it was a BLM protest. I don't quite remember, but it was some sort of protest in which they blocked off the street. And then a guy drove through the crowd And you know, there had been so many
Pace.
attacks on BLM. Yeah, of course, you're a monster.
Happened on our stream.
On BLM
Crazy.
protesters previously. They thought like, oh, this is another right wing nut. But when they caught up with this guy, he's like, well, I've got like a monitoring thing. I'm out on bail. If I don't get to work, if I'm not on time for work, then I go back to jail. Right? Like it makes people make really tough choices because life fucking happens. If you have kids like don't necessarily like operate in a way that is conducive to your electronic monitoring conditions, right? So instead of putting people through all that, which was just going to get them reincarcerated, right? It's just an excuse to once again put them back in general. If we don't think they're going to run, then there's no need to just let them go and have at it.
Well, so what I would say, like, I don't think that's inherent to like the tracking, as in like I'd be like intuitively, I'd be in favor of like, you know, not putting the restrictions of like you have to be like whatever at home by X time and you're just limited by going back to work. That's not, I don't think that's a problem with the tracking, because like from what I understand, and definitely correct me if I'm wrong, where it's like, yeah, the concern is like you're just gonna like skip town, you're like unreachable. Like I don't see why you have to, if your stated goal is just like get them to stay locally. Like I don't see why you have to like put in restrictions like you can only go from like work to home.
Right, well, because we don't want them to like be going committing crimes. We don't want them to like go to places where they shouldn't be going, go back to the drug dens, go back and like rob places. We just like that's where we don't want them to go. Well, for most people, that's like it's going to be an issue for a lot of these criminals, right? So
drug dens?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, can
But,
I
Go ahead, Scott.
All right, so this is that part of the stream where I force you guys to listen to actual logical principles. And Prime Guys likes
time to sleep. Time to sleep.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, I know we all always have to meme and pretend like I'm not right, because you can never argue against it. So let's explain what's actually going on here, right? If you commit a crime, you are stopped from having any freedom or liberty and being able to argue in favor of the non-aggression principle until you pay restitution. Plus, sometimes some people would consider it double, but the cost of finding you, such as Lactoid mentioned, the cost of monitoring, et cetera, plus restitution, right? You're stopped from being able to argue that any aggression goes against you up to the restitution towards the victims of those that you have harmed, right? Now, the state has a monopoly on the justice system, which means that we are not at liberty to actually be able to engage in voluntary justice. We're not able to sign contracts with rights enforcement agencies. We're not able to choose what insurance companies represent us, etc. So it is the state's responsibility to hold in trust that which it has stolen from us, which is the voluntary association of being able to enact property, to be able to act conflict on our behalf when people violate our rights. Because of these things, if someone is guilty of a crime, right, what the state does is justified until that person puts forward restitution. If they are innocent, everything that they have done to that person is a crime committed by the state, and they should demand restitution for all of those things. Now, in a private system, companies are going to work to reduce those costs as much as possible. And therefore, it is the state's responsibility, holding in trust that which they have stolen from us, voluntary association and rights enforcement, right? It is their responsibility to reduce that cost to the highest possible way that they can. And so what this means is that you don't engage in, if they pay restitution to people, like I was saying, well, that's tax money. That's stolen tax money. So we have to use whatever systems pay out the least amount of restitution. And on top of that, we can't be letting people go that are stopped, because the state should also be responsible for the crimes that those people commit. And so the appropriate answer here is to get rid of bail completely. And if there is enough evidence to convict, to keep those people in jail until their court date, not remand them out on bail so that they can commit more crimes.
Sure, we got that. And the only thing I disagree with, well, maybe other stuff, but the main thing I disagree with is that whatever the state does to a person while they're guilty is just. I'll put that
up to restitution is what I said.
But not everything is. No, I mean if they're guilty. Sorry.
If they're guilty,
if they're guilty. up
Yeah.
to restitution. Sorry, what do you mean by up to restitution? In that sense, then.
Right. So let's say I steal $100 from you, right?
Yeah.
Then you are stopped from arguing against the
Oh.
non-aggression principle until you give me roughly 200, right? Or 100 plus whatever it took me to track you down to get my 100, right? And so if the state does something to you that is of the value of $100, A-okay, because that's the punishment for the crime. But if the state does something to you beyond the value of the $100, right, then what they have done is completely unjustified because you've already been punished for what it is that you've done.
What is the
Stolen
value
$100.
of like my murdered child? Well, actually, you know,
See, that's the problem. Is that all value? No. Corey doesn't know what he's talking about. All value is subjective. There's no like everything. All value is subjective. This is the problem with state justice system inherently because it is up to the individual to decide the value of their objects, and they can only prove that based off of what it is that they would pay to have things returned. So, for the murder of your child, for example. Right? If there was a machine that existed where you could step into the machine and it would kill yourself and bring my child back to life, then you would be forced to go into that machine in order to give me my child back. And therefore, it is justified to murder you in exchange for murdering my child.
Okay, I disagree with so much of this, but like I'll have to wait on that. Doobie, I wanted to get to you previously on the shot collar thing. What I've been saying to our friend Lactoid. Do you feel that what do you think? What I had been saying that we shouldn't even bother.
Sometimes I just have to drop libertarian knowledge on people.
How confident they will show up and won't.
Just how that works.
Then we should let them go and just leave it at that.
Yeah, Walter Block's argument is the quickest way to do it for sure, Casimir.
I think that if we don't have a system where we have like some kind of tracking technology on them, right, whether it's the shot collar or like an ankle monitor or something like that, then I'd be okay with letting loose way fewer potential criminals. Right? I think that not having a way to track them just ensures that less of them are going to be let out, less innocent people are going to be let out, because there's the chance that they are not innocent, that they're going to reoffend, that they're going to try to run away. And if that chance is high, then it makes more sense to keep them behind bars.
Okay, well then let me try to bridge the gap between Lactoid, Doobie, and myself. All right, would you, at the very least, reform how we do the tracking? So, I think that when you institute tracking systems like this, there's inevitable like a one-way ratchet in which like we are more and more restrictive. But let's pretend it's not the case. Let's pretend that like if we can enact reforms, then we can expand and just be more considerate and about like other people's lives, right? Because life does happen. You don't just go from back to work and to home. Things happen along the way. Circumstances happen. So like, would you expand like the places that they could go? Maybe communication with the individual who's being tracked. So like if something comes up, they can easily explain it and not be punished severely for it.
Yeah, I'd be okay with that. Yeah,
I like that.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true in my system as well, right? Because it's the state's responsibility to reduce the tax burden to its greatest ability, right? And so if you're forced to pay restitution for people that you've kidnapped who are innocent, right? Letting them out with an ankle monitor and letting them do their life to the best of their ability reduces that much restitution that you have to pay, right? If you kidnap someone and they can't go to their job and they lose their job and they can't see their family, and like you have to pay all of that money back if they're innocent every single time. That's the only logically consistent position. And so if you can give them an ankle monitor that allows them to keep their job, allows them to see their family, allows them to do those things, that's a reduction in the restitution that needs to be paid. And that restitution is stolen tax money. So we need to limit that stolen tax money that they give out to other people to the best of our ability. So I would agree with that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what I was attempting to advocate for, where it's like, it doesn't seem like the problem is like the tracking. It seems like how we do tracking and sort of like all the limits that we place, like we're almost like, and I think it goes against philosophically of like, the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. Whereas, hey, we'll track you, but we're going to limit you to, home and work under the assumption that, you're a criminal already and we don't want you doing more crimes. Where it's
it also causes more expensive problems, right? So like when we look at people that get DUIs, right? And then they get a restricted license, right? They're allowed to drive, but they're only allowed to drive to and from work. And then what ends up happening is there's this entire like state apparatus of like cops that are aware of where you're supposed to be. You get pulled over all the fucking time. You get told, like, and don't get me wrong, fuck people who drink and drive. Like, you're a piece of shit and you deserve like some serious fucking punishment done to you because you put fucking people's lives at risk with your stupidity. Nevertheless, like, it's this expensive apparatus that is probably cheaper just to fucking monitor people. But the thing is that once you pay restitution, we shouldn't have these, like, there's so many restricted programs, but when you see them in action, like, what it ends up with is like wasted cop resources trying to find people in violation of like their to and from work policy and like all these layers of bureaucracy and money so that the county can like make some money because they don't want to tax it. Instead, they want to like make people's lives worse, which just causes more fucking problems for everybody.
Lactoid and Doobie. So I'm willing to have that compromise that we just discussed. I think, sure. If I could get anything, I take that. But my issue is, well, what happens if another incident like the bail project is happening right now, and that a person gets out on bail on these expanded policies, the monitoring policies, and then they commit a crime. It seems like my problem is like keeping this in place politically would be difficult because it's so easy to demagogue against. That's why I say it's like a one-way ratchet, because it's just easier to up the restriction here, like to punish the criminals. We demand reform. Someone got hurt, right, and it's serious, but we demand reform.
Please don't violate TOS.
What we're going to do is we're going to narrow it. We were a little too expansive before. We're going to narrow it, what these people can do, because we can't really trust them. I feel like eventually we'll just end up right back to the system we have already.
So suing the state is famously hard. You can also throw on, if you want, just tort reform. You can make a statute saying nobody can be sued for.
It's not a problem being sued, though. That's not the issue. I'm just saying, as a political matter, that's what will happen. Like,
right, but here's the thing, though, and maybe, Prime, this is where you disagree with a lot of people. I think Scott brought it up, how like for certain violent offenders, they probably shouldn't be let out at all, right? And I agree with that.
No, I agree.
When we're talking about though about like maybe people again who are like more on the like the gray area. Okay, well we're gonna let you out, but we're gonna let you out on an ankle monitor, and we're gonna like really track where you go, and you're not allowed to like go off without some kind of like explanation for some kind of crazy circumstance. You're not allowed to go outside of like certain routes. But then if it's like you just scale it down from there. So like some petty crime, okay, work home, and also like this area generally you're allowed to be in. I mean, you can obviously like make it fit the crime, but. I mean, it seems like this is the answer to bail. Just because if the idea of bail is supposed to be, the idea is at least supposed to be non-punitive, right? The idea is, well, this is an innocent person, so we're not punishing them yet. We just want to make sure that they get back to where they got to be. It would seem like technology would be a much better way of doing this than cash bail. So, if we implemented that system, then I think I would change my position and be against cash bail.
I mean, I think so. I think it is less restrictive and it's a better answer than cash bail. My problem is that it is a punishment in of itself, right? And I think maybe Scott would agree with me on that much, because he's it's
another
it's a
thing
burden,
you have to
but less
point
of a
out.
burden.
One thing you have to point out.
Let me finish my point. So no problem. But yeah, so I'm saying that politically, something like this is difficult to carry, right? Like if a kid gets hurt somehow, right? Like even if the guy never had a record of hurting kids before, but like a kid gets hurt because of these expanded policies in terms of tracking, then the pressure is, hey, we need reform.
Fucking Walter Mondale over here.
These progressive policies have gone too far. And we've got to scale it back. So inevitably, it'll end up with our current system.
I think your system is actually worse on that, though, because at least having this allows for some gray area and allows for people to say, "Oh no, the actual problem wasn't letting them out. The problem was like we didn't let them out with these restrictions." Under your system, what's going to be the argument? The argument is going to be, oh, you obviously let out somebody who shouldn't have been let out. We're just going to expand the pool of people that we just don't let out, right? Because obviously they were dangerous. Obviously they were a flight risk, right? So obviously the way you're measuring this is wrong. We need to expand this, and before you know it, I mean, we're letting it,
the other thing that is important when looking at restitution paid by the state, in like cost benefit analysis, right, held in trust for us, is if you put ankle monitors on people that could have gotten out on bail, right, there is without a doubt going to be a certain number of people that were able to get bail quickly over the weekend, go to their job, and not tell their employer that they have a court date. And if you put an ankle monitor on that person, they're going to show up to their job with an ankle monitor, and their boss is going to find one way or another to fire them, right? Like, people are going to lose their jobs because they have an ankle monitor on, because it's very clear that it's like, hey, like I don't want people like you around here, etc. Unless they're able to, unless the technology makes it to where like the ankle monitor is smaller and you can hide it. And I'm just being practical here, right?
Right, but that's their hold on. But that's if their employer wants to fire somebody for any reason, that's their prerogative.
Right,
I mean,
that's not what.
There it is.
Right, but that would be calculated in the restitution if the person was innocent and they lost their job because, you know, their boss was like, I can't have people with an ankle. Like, I don't know, maybe you're a fucking clown for fucking kids' birthday parties and you show up to work with a fucking ankle monitor on. Your boss is going to be like, fucking no. Right. But like, it could be something you're totally innocent of.
Modify their costume to
like, yeah, but you get what I'm saying, right? Like, you have to do the cost benefit analysis if you're going to pay restitution for people that are innocent, especially when there are a lot of fucking people that are innocent and charged that don't necessarily get convicted.
Okay.
It's just something we have to consider. Like,
but like,
limit cases.
There's employers who want to fire people just for being accused, right? I mean, that's
right. But when you're on bail, a lot of times you don't tell your employer anything. They're not going to fucking know. But if you show up to work with an ankle monitor, they're going to know.
In my state, they will know. In my state, they will know, right? They have CCAP, which is awesome.
Lactoid. And just to maybe address what Scott was bringing up in terms of like, so I've never seen one of these bracelets. Are they like as depicted in movies, like these like large like contraptions that are just like
ankle monitors are very inconvenient depending on your lifestyle.
I could also see it as inconvenient, but again,
I actually wore an ankle monitor
They're
once.
chonky boy. They're chonky.
Oh, really?
Boys. Like,
but
they're not like little.
It's less inconvenient than being in jail.
But
I just want people in collars, so don't trust this man when he talks about how he's advertising collars and shit.
Sorry, it does seem like that's still large, like an engineering problem. Like, it does seem like that there doesn't seem like there's a reason that has to be like that large. Where it's like, yeah, if you want to be able to conceal it, you should probably be able to do that so that you don't get judged for it or stigmatized.
It's because they're not paying restitution. It's the state. The state doesn't have the financial incentive of restitution to make cheaper, more effective ankle monitors that wouldn't have this problem. If the state was forced to pay, if the state was a private person that earned their money and was forced to pay restitution, right? Because their ankle monitors were so much larger, right? They would make more convenient, slimmer, easier to hide ankle monitors.
I mean, like Apple has AirTags, and like I don't see why like you can't be like something to that effect.
I'm also
Apple's a private company.
Gibby, you wore ankle monitor?
Yeah, I did. I had to wear one for like I think like a month and a half or some shit like that. And it was when I was like 18 or 19, I think. And it was for like a speeding ticket, but like multiple speeding tickets, and I didn't pay them, right? So then I got pulled over by the cops and my fucking registration was expired and I didn't have insurance and my license was already suspended, but they caught me driving. And then I had a court date for that, but I still needed to go to work. So of course I drove another car anyway. I got caught again. And at that point I had like 3 different fucking things to go to court for. They as part of the like deal that the public defender came up with, I would have to wear an ankle. I'd basically be released on probation, basically. And I had to wear an ankle monitor for like a month and a half. I had to go to some police facility by jail. They put it on, and it was just like a plastic strap that goes around your leg with a little metal box on it. It's not that annoying. It's you feel it, but you lower your pants over it like it's not a big deal. I wore it for like a month and a half, and I had to go and get it taken off. But yeah, I was very broke, and yeah, broke people do dumb shit, right? This is one of the reasons I was broke all the time back then. So yeah, I think that looking back on that, right, and how much my life would have been totally fucked if the judge had decided to put me in jail for even like a week or something for all this crazy shit that I was doing. I was very grateful for having to wear the ankle monitor.
It wasn't crazy, at least as the story you told, unless maybe I missed something, right? Like
it's just dumb shit, right? Like, well, yeah, but I didn't need a speed, right? I sped. I think I missed the court date, right? Then they charged like a $300 fine on top of that. So then I went to court, but then I didn't have money to pay this stupid thing, and I could have set up a payment plan, but I didn't do that either. So they charged me some other fee on top of that, and then they put out like a bench warrant for me, and then it was a ton of shit, right? And then while all that's going on, I'm still driving on a suspended license with no insurance, no registration, getting tickets. It's really stupid, right? So
don't forget to pay your license reinstatement fee.
No, Doobie.
Yeah, it was dumb shit.
You should have told the cop that you were traveling, not driving. That normally works if you say it.
No, God.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, I'm a sovereign citizen.
I don't follow maritime law, sir.
It was a bad time. I don't suggest it, right? But yeah, given that, like, again, I was broke at the time, very extremely broke. I should have known better, right? So it was my fuck up that got me to that situation in the first place. But even still, like I said, I was very, very grateful that I had that option to.
That's a great place to transition, right? Is Doobie explaining what a fuck up he is?
No, hold on. Was.
So
you just watched a clip from our Twitch channel, Fabian Liberty. If you like content like this, please like and subscribe here on YouTube, or go ahead and give us a follow on twitch.tv/Fabian Liberty.